One of the differences between the desert and California is fire. The desert's not supposed to burn. Joshua trees, junipers, which are those green bushes there, which are these green bushes, and like creosote bushes and stuff that grows in the desert are plants designed, they weren't designed to burn at all. Whereas the California plants are the opposite. They're 100% designed to burn. They have to burn. So this transition area, what keeps the plants, some plants growing here that are not growing here, is the fire. So for example, this fire came through here. This was all a prairie. This area here is a grassland. Normally, it kind of looks like what's behind you right here. This is not burnt, this patch right here. So grasses, bunch grasses, bushes. There's some ephedras up here, which are kind of weird. But what I want you to remember, I told you about oak trees. Remember you heard me saying oak trees are California? Well, the first oak trees we see are right there. These are oak trees right here. These pictures right here. Oak trees can burn to the ground and be perfectly fine. Most of your California native plants in the California Pacific Province, burn them to the ground. They come back from these root stumps. So they're used to it. They're ready to get burned. The junipers here, which are these bushes out here,
to the ground.
Burn to the ground. The juniper bushes that are out here, they're not designed to burn. They burn, they die. They have to be reseeded. And it takes them like 500 years to get back to normal. So what you're seeing as we look across, you can see desert, then you see junipers getting closer together, and right about here, boom, it switches to oak trees, and the oak trees take over and there's no more junipers. So when we don't see the junipers, and when we start seeing the oak trees, that's when we know we've left the desert 100%. We've gone from desert to California because we got oak trees and we got chaparral, which we're going to talk about in a second, and shade scrub, stuff that burns a lot. And basically just a different group of plants that are Mediterranean origins. Remember, it's grouped by the weather. The plants from the desert are coming from Nevada, coming from Arizona. They're coming from inland, either from far inland or from Mexico. So they're from a different type of parents, different type of plants than from the deserts, from the plants we see here, which have more in common with like San Francisco and the redwoods. What was the difference again between California and the weather-wise? What's the California Pacific Province? Remember? It's going to be on your test. You have to remember it. It's in your notes. No. What makes the California Furistic Province? When I talk about California Furistic Province, trees. What is it besides oak trees? What makes it?
The weather.
The weather. But what type of weather?
Mediterranean.
Mediterranean weather. You have to know that. So Mediterranean weather is what?
California.
No. What is Mediterranean weather? When I talk about somewhere on the earth has a Mediterranean climate, it doesn't have to be California.
Humid?
No.
But hot.
Hot and dry in the summer, cold and wet in the winter. Think about our weather here. It should be really easy. When does it rain? In the winter, right? Usually when it's cold, it rains. We know when you get a storm, windy, freezing. In the summer it's hot and sunny. To you that's normal, but that's not a normal climate. Again, only 10 to 15% of the whole world has that climate. So so the part of North America that has that climate is called the California Furistic Province. Does that make sense? Because you're going to have to know that. If you continue further, you're going to be lost. Does that make sense? California Furistic Province is the Mediterranean climate portion of North America. Just like when I say the Desert Furistic Province are all the deserts because of the desert climates of North America. Does that make sense? So, and in the Desert Furistic Province, there's different deserts we're going to talk about. And in the California Furistic Province, there's a bunch of different plant communities. We're not going to go there.
That word you're saying,
Floristic Province.
And what percent of the world has Mediterranean?
Probably like 10 to 15%. But each place is different, right? Because we're not connected to Australia, we're not connected to South Africa, so they all have their different plants. They're similar plants, but different. So today we're going to talk about how the landscape affects the plants that grow in it. But you have to know that the floristic provinces, the two big sections, are based on weather. Okay? Now plant community, remember I talked about plant community?
Yes.
The reason why I'm stressing weather and floristic province is plant communities are based on the landscape. Does that make any sense? So not the weather. Kind of confusing. So province is a big area that has the same type of weather. Yeah, and all the vegetation is similar. Like all the deserts are together because they're all similar climate. But a plant community in the desert can be a plant community because it's in the shade, a plant community because it's on rocks or something else. So what makes up a plant community actually is the landscape, the earth itself, whatever the landscape, we call it the landscape, how the landscape affects the plants actually makes plant communities.
Is that what gives the Mojave, the Joshua, and the Sonora and the Saguaro?
Kind of, yeah, kind of. Those are what we call indicator species. So remember I was talking about oak trees being California? Those are indicator species. On your last notes, we talked about indicator last time in class before our field trip. We talked about indicator species. An indicator species is a plant, when you see it, you know it tells you where you're at.
Yes.
So creosote bush, you see creosote bush, you know you're in the desert forestic province, because you know you're in the desert. If you don't see creosote bushes, which we don't out here, you know you're not in the desert. But if you see a creosote bush, you can't tell which desert you're in. But if you see a Joshua tree, you can. Just like an oak tree. If you see an oak tree, you know you're in the California forestic province, but you don't know where in California you're at. Does that make sense? Unless you know what type of oak tree it is. That's how it works. So the indicator species are ones that tell you, boom, I've left. So when you're driving from here to San Bernardino up over the Cajon Pass, look for Joshua trees and junipers. When you no longer see Joshua trees and junipers, you're no longer in the desert. When all you see is like the chaparral vegetation, they're gone, you're 100% in California forestic province. And then likewise, when you're driving this way and you start to see the junipers and the Joshua trees, that means you've entered the desert. Really simple. Another cool one is when you drive in Arizona, you cross the Colorado River and you start seeing saguaro cactus, you know you're in the Sonoran Desert. As soon as you see those saguaro cactus, everything else looks the same. All the other plants are the same, but instead of Joshua trees, you have saguaro, so that's how you know you're moving into one.
What is the name of the cactus you said?
Saguaro?
Saguaro?
Saguaro cactus, the big ones that look like this. They don't grow in California, but you go just on the other side of the river, Colorado River, on your way to like Phoenix, Arizona, and you see them all of a sudden. They pop up. That's a different desert, though, because it has the indicator species.
Really quick, where could I find a jumping cholla?
We'll see them later on. They're in the college.
Okay.
All around the college. So, this is designed to burn. When we look at this size oak, one of the problems we're having is, how much of this do you think is weeds? If you look at this, how much do you think is not native? What percentage would you say of this little hillside?
What's the question?
How much of this is weeds, you think? Probably 60 or more. All this stuff is weeds.
Grass as well?
All this little grass. The only grass here that's not a weed is this bunch grass. Yeah, our native grasses were bunch grasses. Whenever in your garden you're pulling out these nasty things, you can blame the Spanish because they brought them over. And all the little weeds. All these little things are weeds. And this is the biggest problem we have in California, because now when lightning happens or someone throws their cigarettes out of the fire, there's stuff to communicate the fire between one bush and the other bush. Before the fire, there's dirt. There would be bare dirt between one bunch grass, the next bunch grass, the next bunch grass, and the bushes. Now there's all these weeds, so the fire can go from one plant to the next plant really easily. And now it burns hotter, so it's starting to burn to the point where the native plants don't come back, and the things that do come back are the weeds.
So in a sense, though, is it good that those weeds burn away that aren't native?
No.
So they can
Because they're increasing the fire regime, and they're favoring more weeds.
So the weeds will burn, they'll still grow back.
Yeah, they'll come back because they've replaced that's what they like. And in places like the Cajon Pass where it's burning every couple of years because people are lighting on fire, the native stuff won't come back because it's burning too quickly, too much. For different reasons. Here's something from the desert right here that's not supposed to really be here. Here's an ephedra. We'll talk about that later.